Chapter 1. The Summons. The marble in the Kingsley Group lobby gleamed like a freshly sharpened blade, pristine, cold, and expensive enough to make a girl from Queens feel like a walking stain. Roxy Monroe's heels clicked too loudly against the floor, echoing with every defiant step. She dressed in black, like a funeral for her own career. Even her lipstick, a deep, ironic red, felt like war paint. The receptionist didn't smile, just handed her a gold-edged visitor badge with the deadpan of someone trained to be impressed by no one, not even the man she was about to face. Top floor. "He's expecting you," the woman said, without a trace of warmth. Roxy forced her shoulders back. Don't flinch. She had faced down mayors, celebrities, and one very drunk former senator in a tuxedo. She could handle Adrian Kingsley, no matter how many skyscrapers bore his name. Still, when the elevator opened to a wall of glass and a panoramic view of Manhattan, a view that screamed god-level wealth, her stomach twisted. And then she saw him. Adrian Kingsley stood with his back to her, hands in his pockets, staring out at the skyline like he owned it. Which, in several legal and metaphorical senses, he did. His suit was a kind of armor charcoal gray, perfectly tailored and more intimidating than any threat he'd spoken so far. He didn't turn. "Roxanne Monroe," he said, voice like smooth bourbon over ice. "You have 10 minutes. She didn't flinch. "Not yet." "I'm impressed," she replied, stepping forward. "I thought billionaires had assistants for delivering threats." Now he turned. His eyes were a storm, blue-gray and cold, flickering with a kind of deliberate restraint. The man looked like someone carved from ambition itself. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair that defied the wind, and a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled unless it had just won something. "I don't make threats, Miss Monroe," he said. "I file lawsuits." She met his gaze, chin lifted. "Then file one. I've already drafted a resignation letter and a list of cheaper medications for my mother." Something shifted in his face. Not pity, God forbid, but maybe a flicker of curiosity. Still, his voice remained even. "Do you know how much your little story cost me? It wasn't little, and it wasn't inaccurate. You quoted me saying the people of Detroit were unemployable fossils. I said they were undervalued veterans of a collapsed system. Quite a difference." Roxy's jaw clenched. The quote had been shortened, trimmed for impact by her editor, Felicity Crown. But she'd let it pass. Hadn't fought it. "Too disperace for a byline." Too busy paying bills for a home that leaked and a mother whose insurance had failed her. The paper wanted punch. "They got punch," she said finally. "I didn't realize you bruised that easily." He took a step forward. Not threatening, but close enough to command space. "You've made me a villain, Miss Monroe. A ruthless vulture feasting on the American worker." Stockholders pulled out. My charitable foundation was slammed with protesters, and I was disinvited from 3 legacy fund boards. All because you needed a headline. The silence thickened between them. "You want an apology?" she asked quietly. "Fine. I'm sorry. I regret the quote. I regret trusting my editor. And I regret thinking I could write something halfway honest and still pay for my family's medical bills." A long pause. And then surprisingly he sighed. Not with anger, but something wearier. "You're not the only one playing a part," he said, almost to himself. She blinked. "Excuse me?" He walked past her, toward his desk, pressed a button, and a glass door slid shut behind them. The room fell into a hush, so total it felt unreal, like the world outside had been cut off. "Let's stop wasting time," he said, turning to face her fully. "I'm offering you a choice." Roxy braced. "You can face a very public lawsuit for defamation. My legal team is enthusiastic. And you won't just lose your job, Miss Monroe. You'll lose your health insurance, your dignity, your ability to work in journalism again." "Or?" she asked tightly. "Or," he said, folding his arms, "you can agree to be my fiancée." She stared at him, and then laughed. Loud, disbelieving, half-mad. "You're serious?" she asked, eyes wide. "You want me to fake date you? After you just spent 10 minutes calling me a liar?" "The public hates me," he said flatly. "But they love a redemption arc. A misunderstood man tamed by a brilliant, fiery journalist. It's practically a movie. Roxy's heart thundered. The absurdity, the audacity. You're out of your mind. Possibly. But I'm also disparity. And unlike your tabloid, I only print stories I can control. He opened a sleek folder. Inside, a thick non-disclosure agreement and a contract that looked like it had been drafted by a team of very expensive devils. 3 months, he said. Public appearances. Joint interviews. No physical obligations. Gee, how generous, she snapped. You'll be compensated well enough to keep your family comfortable for years, he added, almost gently. And there it was. The knife. Roxy swallowed hard. She could already hear her little sister's cough through the thin walls at home. Her mother's exhausted voice. The collection notices on the fridge. And after 3 months, she asked, we go our separate ways. You'll get an exclusive interview detailing our amicable breakup, a journalistic first. I'll get my life back. She looked at the contract, then at him. You're insane, she whispered. I'm offering you an out. Her fingers trembled barely, but she nodded. Then hand me a pen. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Gold-plated, likely custom-made, its sleek weight seemed to press her decision deeper into her palm, as if even the tools in Adrian Kingsley's world were aware of gravity in a different way. Roxy stared at the signature line. Roxanne Ivy Monroe, co-conspirator in capitalism's favorite fairy tale. She didn't sign right away. Instead, she let her eyes drift across the contract. It was meticulous. A schedule of events, prepared statements, even a list of preferred emotional expressions she would need to perfect affectionate gaze, proprietary hand on chest, wistful downward smile, when referring to Adrian in interviews. You really thought this through, she murmured. My attorneys did, he said, sitting behind the desk like a king on a minimalist throne. I just vetoed the bullet point about synchronized Instagram captions. She gave him a flat look. Humanizing touch? He didn't smile, but his eyes flickered just a little with something dry. Maybe regret. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe that flicker of humanity people said he didn't have. What do you get out of this, really? She asked, voice quieter now. Besides a better stock rebound? He leaned back, watching her with unsettling stillness. There are acquisitions pending, board seats in flux, philanthropic awards based on public perception. And then there's breathing room. Breathing room? When the press paints you as a soulless monster, he said, eventually, even your reflection begins to agree. Roxy hesitated. That admission, it wasn't calculated. It wasn't pity-seeking. It landed somewhere in her gut like a stone dropped in still water. Not kite sympathy. Not yet. But the ripple was undeniable. Still, she didn't let him see it. And you think putting a broke journalist on your arm is the answer? No, he said simply, but I think you're the answer. Roxy blinked. He stood again and crossed toward her, calm, unhurried. When he reached her, he offered his hand not romantically, but almost ceremonially. An invitation into a role neither of them fully believed in yet. You challenge me, he said. You don't cover. You're media-trained, witty enough to sell the story, and damaged enough to sell it believably. She arched a brow. Wow. That last part? Beautifully romantic? He didn't apologize. I don't need romantic, Miss Monroe. I need real. Or at least, real enough to pass. She looked again at the paper. Her name floated beneath the lines like a whispered dare. It would be a betrayal of every ethical code she pretended to uphold. It would be the biggest lie she'd ever told. But it might also save her family. She signed. Her name looked smaller than usual, like it was already drowning. They emerged together 20 minutes later. Adrian's driver waited outside a sleek black town car, the kind that belonged in movies where people wore sunglasses at night. Roxy hesitated on the marble steps, the city pulsing in humid late-afternoon haze around her. She hadn't even made it back to the street before she felt the shift eyes on her. Phones raised. A ripple in the information current. They'll know by tomorrow, Adrian said behind her, hands in his pockets. We're having dinner Friday. Private table. Micheline starred. You'll wear something red. You look dangerous in red. She turned. Do you tell all your fake fiancés what colors to wear? Only the first one. The word stung more than expected. First implied only, but not forever. Why me, really? She asked. You could have paid an actress. Hired someone prepackaged. Because you already ruined me, he said simply, and that makes you the only one who can help me recover. Then he opened the car door for her. She slid in. The ride downtown was quiet. The air inside the car smelled like leather and clean linen and something expensive she couldn't name. Roxy stared out the window at a world she barely belonged to. A city of rooftop gardens, gallery openings, people sipping cocktails with last names that opened doors. In the glass, her reflection looked unfamiliar. Not just tired, but rearranged. What had she done? Her phone buzzed. Felicity Crown. Saw you walking out of Kingsley HQ. Tell me I'm not about to be very rich or very disappointed. Roxy stared at the screen. For once, she didn't know how to lie. She powered it off. By the time she reached her apartment in Astoria, the sun had dipped behind the skyline. She climbed the stairs to her third-floor walk-up, past peeling paint and the familiar creak on the fifth step. Inside, the air smelled like old books and budget takeout. Her sister Lily was asleep on the couch, one hand curled over a heating pad on her abdomen, a copy of People magazine draped over her chest. Their mother coughed softly from the back bedroom. Roxy stood there, motionless. This was why she'd done it. Not the paycheck, not even the thrill of a second chance, but the people who couldn't afford for her to have principles right now. She slipped out of her heels and tiptoed into the kitchen, her stomach knotting tighter with every step. In her purse, the NDA whispered like a viper. She opened the fridge empty except for oat milk, an open jar of olives, and half a rotisserie chicken. Roxy sat at the table and picked at the chicken with her fingers, eating silently in the dim glow of the stove light. Outside, a siren wailed. Somewhere, a couple argued 2 floors down. Life carried on. And inside her mind, one name echoed louder than the rest. Adrian Kingsley. Millionaire. CEO. Control freak. Possibly heartless. And now, hers. At least for 3 months. She swallowed dryly and reached for her laptop. If she was going to sell this lie, she'd better learn everything about the man she was about to love. Chapter 2. The Proposal. The Kingsley estate looked like something out of an architectural fever dream, glass and stone, and manicured brutality perched on the edge of Long Island Sound. It wasn't so much a house as a declaration. I made it. And I'll never let anyone forget. Roxy Monroe stepped out of the town car in a dress that clung too right and shoes that pinched too hard. She'd borrowed both from an old friend in fashion PR. The dress was crimson, as requested. Sleek, off-shoulder, and vaguely lethal. Adrian wanted spectacle? Fine. She would be his weapon. A valet appeared to take her coat, though she didn't have one, and then the doors opened with a hushed, hydraulic sigh. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors veined like frozen lightning. Art installations made of iron and sorrow. A spiral staircase that looked like it had been designed by a depressed genius. This man lives like a ghost trying to remember how to be human, she thought. She found him in the back atrium. Adrian Kingsley stood beside a grand piano he didn't play, hands in his pockets, collar unbuttoned, just enough to hint at vulnerability. He turned at the sound of her heels, and for the first time since they'd met, he stared. "Red suits you," he said. "So I've been told," Roxy replied, arching one brow. He stepped closer, gaze flickering briefly to her bare collarbone. "You clean up well, Miss Monroe. You mean I no longer look like the reckless tabloid witch who nearly toppled your empire? Don't flatter yourself. You only bruised it." His voice was dry, but something else ran beneath it: interest, caution, hunger held in check. Roxy looked around. So, this is where the dragon counts his gold. This is where the dragon occasionally dines and signs merger papers. Charming. They stood in silence a moment. Close. Not touching. The tension between them had changed. Still taut, but warped. Less antagonistic. more like two magnets pulling at each other through a pane of glass. Adrian moved toward a low cabinet and poured 2 glasses of something aged and amber. "We need to set expectations," he said, handing her one. "No surprises. No improvisations." Roxy accepted the glass but didn't drink. Her gaze flicked to the swirling liquor. "That why you called me here instead of just emailing me the itinerary? Because people like Leon Cray are already circling. He'll plant a mole, a camera, a microphone in your hair extensions if you let him." "I don't wear extensions." "Then consider yourself ahead of the curve." She finally smiled, crooked and wary. "So, what do you want from me tonight? Practice? Performance?" He leaned back against the piano, sipping his drink, the ice clinking softly. "I want you to understand something, Roxy." The way he said her name, it wasn't dismissive anymore. Not ammunition. It was something closer to curiosity. Or caution. This is going to get ugly before it gets elegant. People will dig. They'll look for cracks. They'll assume the worst. "And what exactly is the worst, Adrian?" she asked, stepping closer. "That you might be capable of liking someone without calculating the ROI. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "There will be a photo opportunity tomorrow," he said instead. "We'll be photographed, leaving a private charity auction. I'll hold your waist. You'll smile like you've just been told a secret you're not allowed to share. Keep your left hand visible. Jewelry will be provided." She laughed softly. "You've done this before." "No," he said, "but I've watched enough to know how it's done." There it was again, that flicker. The man who observed life from the outside, who stood in billion-dollar rooms, yet always felt like a guest. She studied him. "Why haven't you ever actually dated someone long-term?" His eyes narrowed not in anger, but calculation. The question had caught him off script. "Because most people either want to own me or be owned." "And you?" "I'd prefer something in between." Their eyes locked. Something unspoken passed between them, hot, brief, almost unbearable. Then Adrian turned and opened a drawer in the sideboard. From it, he drew a small velvet box. "This," he said, holding it out to her, "is your engagement ring." Roxy stared at it, not because it sparkled like betrayal and royalty all in one, but because it made the whole thing real. Adrian flipped it open. The ring wasn't garish. No 16-carat monstrosity. Just a vintage oval-cut diamond set in a delicate band of intertwined platinum and rose gold. Elegant. Intentional. A symbol of something he didn't seem to believe in but still wanted others to. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It belonged to my mother," he replied. She looked up, startled. He met her gaze. Unreadable. "It will get the tabloids frothing, Bert." "Does she know you're using it for PR warfare?" "She's been dead 10 years, Adrian said simply, but she would have understood. Roxy touched the ring with one finger. "It was cool. Sharp at the edges. Do I have a say in whether I wear this?" "Of course," he said. "You can say yes now, or dramatically throw it back at me in 3 months." She lifted it from the box and slid it onto her finger. "Perfect fit. Guess I'm committed now." Adrian's voice dropped. "Just slightly. Not yet. But soon." The flashbulbs began before they even reached the sidewalk. Roxy blinked against the barrage of light, her arm carefully linked through Adrian's. They were stepping out of the sleek black town car and onto the cobblestone entry of the Rothschild Foundation's annual charity auction in Tribeca, a playground of elite donors, aged socialites, and whispered legacy deals. Cameras called their names like war chants. "Mr. Kingsley, is it true you're engaged? Who's the lucky lady?" "Roxy Monroe. What's your take on this unexpected twist? Can we see the ring?" Adrian turned toward her with the slightest tilt of his head, permission granted. Roxy raised her left hand with a subtle smile. Not too proud. Not too smug. She tilted her head just enough to suggest affection. Not fake affection, secret affection. She could feel him watching her. Adrian's hand rested low on her back. His palm was steady, almost warm through the thin fabric of her dress. The weight of it wasn't possessive, more like an anchor, reminding her of her role. "You're a journalist," he'd said in the car. "So act. Convince them you've uncovered something no one else could." And so she did. Inside, the gala was a cathedral of curated excess. Crystal chandeliers dripped like frozen constellations. Waiters in midnight tuxedos carried trays of smoked scallops and champagne. Somewhere in the corner, a jazz trio played a mournful rendition of Fly Me to the Moon. Roxy couldn't tell if she was floating or drowning. "Smile," Adrian murmured beside her. "You look like you're about to write an exposé, en foie gras." "I might," she said under her breath. "This many rich people in one room? Tempting. And yet, you're one of them. At least tonight." He leaned closer, as if whispering something romantic, but his voice remained cool. "The cameras are still on us." She forced a laugh, light and flirtatious, tilting her face toward his. "You're lucky I'm good under pressure. You're not bad under diamonds either." She blinked, startled by the compliment. It wasn't in the script. He hadn't said it like a tactic. For a heartbeat, her smile slipped into something real. They made the rounds. Roxy shook hands with investment bankers who barely masked their disdain, women with names like Blythe and Catriona who wore $12,000 gowns and looked through her like a smudge on a mirror, but she held her own. Her charm came edged, a blend of wit and wary elegance. She told a hedge fund manager his wine teeth made him look like a Bond villain in a flattering way. Adrian laughed. So did the table. And when a society blogger asked how they met, Adrian answered smoothly. "She wrote something that made me furious," he said, lifting his glass. "Then I met her and realized she was the only person in the room telling the truth." Roxy nearly choked on her champagne. An hour later, they sat in the back of the car again, gliding past the glimmer of the East River. The silence was different now. Les défensives, still charged. Roxy leaned her head against the cool glass window, exhaling slowly. "Do you do that often?" she asked quietly. "Do what?" "Lie so beautifully." He didn't answer immediately. "That wasn't a lie," he said at last. "At least not the second part." Her eyes turned to him. "You hated me. You probably still do." "I hated what you represented," he said. "You reminded me that perception is louder than truth." She swallowed. "And now?" Adrian looked at her. Not just at her mouth or dress or hair, but the woman underneath the script. "Now you're a risk I'm choosing to take." She didn't breathe for a full second. Outside, the city bled past them in lights and steel. But inside the car, everything narrowed, two people wrapped in the thrum of something that wasn't supposed to be real, but suddenly felt like it could be. "You're not what I expected either," Roxy said. "Disappointed? Terrified." He let out a soft, almost soundless laugh. "Good. That means this might actually work." She turned away because looking at him for too long felt like falling through ice and stared back out at the city. Her reflection in the window wore someone else's dress, someone else's ring. But her pulse was hers, and it was racing. Chapter 3. Enter the spotlight. They became headlines before breakfast. By 8:04 a.m., the Times ran, "Adrian Kingsley engaged to tabloid critic Roxy Monroe? Sources say yes." By 8:17, TMZ had a side-by-side comparison of her outfit to 3 royal engagements. By 9 o'clock, her inbox was flooded with old flames, new offers, and at least one marriage proposal from a man in Kansas with a pet ferret named Elon. Roxy sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring at the chaos on her cracked iPhone screen with a numb kind of awe. "You've gone viral." Her sister Lily called from the couch, spooning oatmeal like it was popcorn. "You're trending harder than that politician who fell off the yacht last week." Roxy groaned and laid her forehead on the table. "I haven't even had coffee, and the internet thinks I'm the next Meghan Markle." "Well," Lily said brightly, "you do have the bone structure for it." She lifted her head only when her phone buzzed with that tone, the one assigned to Kingsley Communications' private line. "Adrian." She hesitated, then picked up. "Morning." Came his voice, low, smooth, still wrapped in silk sheets and power. "You've officially ruined my life," she said. "On the contrary, you're trending at number 2. That's a gift." "What's number 1? "A baby giraffe born in Miami named after Taylor Swift." "Well, that's humbling." He chuckled quiet, but genuine. Be ready by noon. We're doing lunch at the Beaumont. Paparazzi will be outside. Let me guess, hold hands on the way in, sit close, share dessert. Exactly. And try to look like you're the reason I get out of bed in the morning. That'll cost extra. Send me an invoice. She was still smiling when the call ended, and that terrified her. The Beaumont Hotel was designed to intimidate. Gold leaf on the ceilings, murals painted by Italian masters, servers who made you feel uncultured just by looking at you. Roxy Monroe, who once ate dollar pizza in a subway tunnel, now walked past a hedge wall of cameras in a silk blouse and a blazer worth more than her rent. Adrian walked beside her like he'd been born for it. He wore a navy suit with a black shirt, no tie, the collar open like sin, and his watch alone probably cost more than her journalism degree. He reached for her hand as they stepped into the flash zone. His fingers curled around hers. Warm. Steady. To the outside world, it looked effortless. Romantic. To Roxy, it felt like lightning tucked into his palm. Inside, they were shown to a semi-private table near a wall of cascading orchids. As soon as they sat, Adrian leaned in, speaking quietly as he stirred his espresso. The man in the gray vest behind us works for Cray Media. He'll leak whatever he hears. So smile. And lean in. She obeyed. Let her laugh rise just a little too loud. Brushed her hand down his arm like muscle memory. This feels like espionage, she whispered, keeping the flirtation in her voice just so. That's because it is. Only instead of secrets, we're trading credibility. She sipped her water and scanned the room. Wealth wore many faces here, Botoxed, power-hungry, bored. And yet, as she looked back at Adrian, she realized he didn't blend in. He commanded. He wasn't the richest man in the room, probably not even the most connected. But he had gravity, this relentless self-control, like he had mastered the art of appearing untouched, untouchable. And somehow, that made her want to touch him more. Tell me something real, she said, surprising herself. Not for the show. For me. Adrian didn't flinch. He set down his espresso and met her eyes. My father died in that same chair. Roxy blinked. What? He nodded toward the corner. 15 years ago. Heart attack. Sunday brunch. Same hotel, same room. They remodeled, but I remember the tablecloth. The air changed. Thickened. Jesus, Adrian. He hated heart-healthy food. Ate steak and eggs right until the end. Roxy didn't know what to say. Why come back here? Because everyone expected me not to. She looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, she saw past the armor. Beneath the charm and calculation, Adrian Kingsley was not invincible. He was just a man who'd built his empire on the ashes of things he couldn't fix. The meal ended in silence, save for the occasional burst of laughter Roxy forced for the benefit of onlookers. Outside, as the valet pulled up their car, Adrian's hand slid to the small of her back again. Familiar now, but still electric. You handled that well, he said, opening the door for her. I'm used to pretending, she replied. But as he slid in beside her, she realized something terrifying. So was he. And with each performance, the line between act and emotion blurred. She wasn't sure which part scared her more. The invitation had been clear. Kingsley and fiancée to attend weekend donor retreat at Thornbridge Manor. Rooms provided. Public address required. Private dinner expected. Roxy stared at the estate from the passenger seat of Adrian's vintage Jaguar. Black, sleek, loud as sin. This is not a house, she muttered. This is a fortress that breeds presidential candidates. Technically, 3 senators and a prime minister, Adrian replied without looking away from the road. Good to know we're among ghosts. And donors. Ghosts with deep pockets. The manor loomed ahead, ivy-covered, symmetrical, intimidating in its perfection. Roxy had seen it in Architectural Digest once, in an article about homes that evoked old money without apology. As they pulled up the circular drive, valets descended like birds of prey. Adrian stepped out first. The cameras followed. He came around to her side, opened the door, and offered his hand. Roxy took it. It was the first time she'd touched him without armor. And it rattled her, His palm was calloused, not what she expected from a boardroom king. He helped her out slowly, as if she were something fragile, breakable. Careful, Adrian, she thought. That's how feelings begin. Inside, the manor was already crawling with billionaires, politicians, legacy donors, and their perfectly curated children. Everyone greeted Adrian like royalty, polite, smiles hiding sharp intentions. "You'll be sleeping in the East Wing," said one of the event coordinators in a discreet black suit. "Suite 7B. It has an open floor plan." Roxy's heart skipped. "I'm sorry, we're sharing a room?" "Naturally," the woman replied. "You are engaged." Adrian said nothing, just gave Roxy a look measured, unreadable. "We can't say no," that look said. "We agreed to this," hers shot back. But neither of them said it aloud, because admitting discomfort would be admitting vulnerability, and neither had agreed to that. Suite 7B was a palace of implied intimacy. One bed, king-sized, draped in French linen and absurd luxury. One fireplace already flickering. A silver tray of strawberries, champagne, and 2 engraved name cards on the nightstand. Mr. Kingsley and Miss Monroe. Forever starts now. Roxy kicked off her heels and muttered, "If I wake up with a poem carved into the headboard, I'm leaving." Adrian loosened his tie and went to the bar. "Drink?" "I'll need 3. He poured silently. The air between them was close now. No cameras. No crowd. Just the sharp hum of restrained awareness. He handed her a crystal tumbler. Their fingers brushed. She felt it. So did he. "This isn't in the contract," she said quietly. "What?" "The way you look at me when no one else is watching." He didn't deny it. "Neither is the way you smile at me when they are." The fireplace popped. Somewhere beneath the heat and glamour, something raw stirred. They drank in silence. She sat on the edge of the bed. He leaned against the mantel. "Why me?" she asked again this time, softer. No sarcasm. No armor. He didn't answer immediately. "Because you make me feel something I don't understand," he said at last. "And for the first time, I'm not sure I want to." She looked up at him. Eyes dark. Ringed with firelight. Jaw tense. "That's not love," she said. "That's danger." He stepped forward, one slow movement at a time. "Sometimes," he said, voice low, "they feel exactly the same." She didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't breathe. Until his phone buzzed on the nightstand. The spell shattered. Adrian turned away, breaking eye contact with a precision that almost hurt. "Dinner starts in 30 minutes, he said. "We should change." She nodded. Without a word, she crossed into the dressing room, shut the door, and leaned her back against it. Her heart was thudding against her ribs. They hadn't kissed. They hadn't even touched. And yet she felt scorched. Dinner was a blur of speeches and slow-burn stares. They played the part holding hands under the table, whispering inside jokes that weren't jokes, laughing at nothing. But beneath the performance, something real had begun to throb, and neither of them knew how to stop it. Later that night, back in the suite, they found a line had already been drawn. Adrian had moved one of the armchairs to the far side of the room and draped a throw blanket over it. "It's not much, but it spares us the conversation," he said simply. Roxy smiled, relieved, maybe, or just impressed. "Didn't peg you for a gentleman." "Neither did I." She climbed into the bed, fully clothed. He settled into the chair. They turned off the lights. And in the dark, just before sleep, she whispered, "You're not supposed to make this feel safe." His answer came like a breath in the dark. "You're not supposed to make this feel real." Chapter 4. Fractures and Friction. The sound of water dripping echoed in the silence of Adrian's penthouse. Not from a leak, God. No, but from the minimalist stone fountain he'd imported from Kyoto. It was designed to calm the senses. But Roxy wanted to throw her borrowed heel into it. She sat at the edge of a white leather chaise that cost more than her childhood home, glaring at the wall-sized window framing Manhattan's skyline. "You called me here at 7 a.m. For a PR strategy meeting?" she asked. Voice brittle from too little sleep and too much pretending. "No," Adrian said, crossing the room with quiet authority. "I called you here because you leaked." Roxy turned. "What?" He held up a tablet. Her own words glared back at her from a mirror exclusive. "Sources close to the couple say Roxy and Adrian's chemistry is undeniable, but is it real, or calculated for public sympathy?" She read the byline. Not hers, but her phrasing, her tone. Felicity. Roxy closed her eyes, fury coiling in her chest. "I didn't give them that." "You didn't have to," Adrian said coldly. "You've been talking to your editor. About logistics, appearances, cover angles, things you approved. And now she's spinning narratives that make you look lovesick and me look like a brand." "You are a brand," Roxy snapped. "And I'm a liability you hired to fix it, remember?" That landed. His jaw twitched. They stared at each other, tension rippling like heat off asphalt. "You said you wanted real," Roxy added, softer. "Well, here it is. Real gets messy. Real makes mistakes." Adrian turned away, pacing toward the window. "Messy I can manage. What I can't afford is betrayal." "And what about trust?" she asked. "You dragged me into your world and made me lie to it. How do you expect me to survive that without confiding in someone?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't have one. Later, after the shouting and silence, after the contracts had been reviewed and both parties had pretended to forget the shouting, Roxy wandered the halls of Adrian's penthouse. The place was immaculate, sterile almost. Art hung on the walls, but it was curated, not lived in. Everything had purpose, but nothing had personality. Except one room. She pushed open a door near the end of the hall and found warmth. It wasn't large. No steel sculptures. No harsh lines. Just a quiet space with worn shelves, a leather couch, and paintings stacked against the wall, half-framed, unsigned. Her breath caught. A sketch sat on an easel, half-finished. Charcoal. A woman's face familiar and raw. Her own. Eyes intense. Mouth unresolved. "He's been drawing me," she realized. Behind her, Adrian's voice came low, almost uncertain. "You weren't supposed to see that." She turned slowly. He stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. "Why?" she asked. "You draw? When I can't sleep." "So? Always?" A reluctant smirk. Then quiet. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice no longer demanding but aching. "Because your face won't leave me alone," he said, stepping in. "Because when I try to forget you, I see that look, the one where you're about to say something cruel and kind at the same time." She couldn't speak. He came closer. "You said I'm a brand. You're right. But with you, I forget the performance." Just for a second. The room shrank. So did the space between them. He reached out, brushed a lock of hair from her cheek. "That's not part of the script," she whispered. Neither was this. He kissed her. Not like a man trying to convince a camera, but like a man who hadn't kissed someone in a long, long time, who didn't know if he deserved to anymore. Roxy melted into it. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because everything they'd faked had suddenly caught fire. His hands cupped her face. Hers curled into his shirt. There were no rules here. No headlines. No audience. Just the truth. And it was terrifying. Roxy left Adrian's penthouse with her lips still tingling and her heart knotted into something unrecognizable. The kiss hadn't been rehearsed. It hadn't been for show. And that made it dangerous. She stepped onto Fifth Avenue like a woman walking between two lives, one wrapped in silk and curated smiles, the other fraying at the seams with real need, real risk, real consequences. Her phone buzzed before she even reached the subway. Felicity Crown. Lunch. 1 p.m. Don't flake. We have your next cover and your next mistake if you don't show. Roxy almost didn't go. But Felicity wasn't someone you avoided. She was someone you confronted head-on, or she'd write your downfall in glittering ink. The bistro was all glass and gold trim. The kind of place where martinis came with edible flowers and guilt cost extra. Felicity wore red sharp, tailored, the kind of red that meant war. Her lips matched. So did her smile. "Look at you," she said as Roxy sat, still glowing. "If I didn't know better, I'd say you were actually enjoying being engaged to a billionaire." Roxy didn't smile. "I'm not here for games." "You're not?" Felicity cocked her head. "Then why are you still playing one?" The waiter came and left with orders. Roxy barely tasted. Felicity leaned in. "Here's the thing, darling. I made you. Before the scandal, before the engagement, you were a scrappy background name. Now you're a brand. My brand." "You ran that story without my approval," Roxy said, voice tight. "Correction, I ran you. And it worked. You're the redemption arc of the decade." Felicity slid a folder across the table. Inside, photos. Private moments. Roxy and Adrian at Thornbridge. By the fire. On the lawn. Him touching her hand. Her looking up at him like he was the only man in the world. "Those weren't public events," Roxy said coldly. "No, but they were perfect. Emotional bait. The public wants to believe in you. And I'm giving them a reason to." Roxy's breath caught, because those moments had been real, and Felicity had turned them into narrative. "What do you want?" Roxy asked. Felicity's smile turned sharper. "Access. Exclusives. I want you to keep feeding me pieces of the fantasy. And if it happens to turn real, even better. People love messy truths. And if I say no, then you're just a liar again, Roxanne. One who betrayed $1 billion man and the American dream." Roxy closed the folder. "You're disgusting. I'm efficient. And you're in love, almost. It's intoxicating. Keep playing it out. And when it all crashes, I'll make you immortal." Roxy stood. Her hands shook. "You have no idea what this is. You think it's a headline, but it's a heart mine." Felicity didn't blink. Even better, she purred. Hearts bleed beautifully in print. That night, Roxy couldn't sleep. She sat on her fire escape in a hoodie and leggings, staring at the glowing skyline like it might answer the question burning through her. What happens when the fake becomes the truth? Because she wasn't just falling for Adrian's image. She was falling for his silences. His haunted eyes. The way he looked at her like she made the noise in his head go quiet. She touched the ring on her finger. It sparkled. But all she could feel was the weight. Meanwhile, across the city, Adrian stood alone in his sketch room, charcoal dust on his fingers, staring at the half-finished portrait of the woman who had ruined him, and might be the only one who could put him back together. He reached for the canvas, and added a small, aching detail. A tear at the corner of her eye. Chapter 5. The Kiss. Rain painted the windows of Adrian's townhouse in slow, vertical strokes, like the sky itself had grown tired of holding everything in. The storm had rolled in suddenly, drenching the city in silver and sound. Roxy stood barefoot in his living room, her borrowed umbrella dripping on the hardwood as thunder murmured above the skyline. "I thought we canceled tonight," she said, brushing damp hair from her cheek. "We did," Adrian replied, appearing in the doorway with rolled-up sleeves and bare feet. "Then I saw your name trending again." Roxy groaned. "Felicity? Anonymous source claims you're already pregnant." "God. At least let me have a real kiss first." The words slipped out before she could stop them. They hung there, charged and electric, as if the room itself paused to inhale. Adrian's gaze locked onto hers. That flicker of danger again. Not malice want. He didn't speak. Instead, he walked past her to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of scotch. "Stay," he said, offering her one. "The storm's too loud to lie through anyway." Roxy hesitated, then took the glass. The lights dimmed as a low boom echoed across the sky, and the city outside disappeared behind fogged glass. They ended up sitting on the living room floor, him in a black sweater, her wrapped in one of his oversized blankets, the kind that smelled faintly like cedar and something darker beneath. "You don't talk much about your past," Roxy said, swirling her drink. "Even in interviews. It's always numbers and projections. Because no one wants to hear that I was just a kid from Montauk with a drunk father and a mother who prayed too loudly." That caught her off guard. "You grew up in Montauk?" "Tiny house. Bad wiring. When my father died, my mother started leaving saints on the windowsills like they were sentries. She used to say I had a coldness in me." I think she meant hunger. Roxy looked at him differently, then not as a billionaire, but as a boy who'd outgrown his home so violently, he built one from glass just to see if it could shatter. "Why didn't you ever go back?" she asked gently. "Because when I left, I promised I'd never need saving again." Silence stretched. Rain drummed steadily above them like a second heartbeat. "You're not cold," Roxy said finally. "You're just terrified someone might see you as anything less than invincible." He didn't answer. But he didn't look away either. When the storm knocked the power out at 9:27 p.m., they were already drifting towards something unspoken. The sudden darkness erased the distance between them. Adrian rose first, moving to the fireplace. He lit it with quiet efficiency. One spark, one breath, and the room bloomed in gold. Roxy stood, wrapped in his blanket like armor. He looked up at her from the hearth. "You said something earlier," he murmured, "about wanting a real kiss." Her heart skipped. "I was joking." "I'm not." And then, impossibly, he crossed to her. Slow. Intentional. Like he was walking into a moment he couldn't afford to rush. His hand cupped her cheek, tentative, reverent. "If we do this," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain, "it's not part of the deal." "I know. And I won't be able to pretend it didn't happen." "Then don't." And with that, he kissed her. Not with fire. Not with force. But with the aching hunger of a man who had gone too long untouched. Her lips parted with a sigh. And in that sigh, something broke. Not a rule. Not a promise. But a wall she'd spent years building. Adrian kissed her like a man unraveling. Slow. Measured. And then suddenly not. His mouth moved over hers with growing urgency, fingers threading into her damp hair like he'd been waiting years, not weeks, to touch her. Roxy leaned into him, helpless against the quiet devastation of it. The kiss was too soft to be a performance, too searching to be anything but real. There was no choreography here. No calculated angles, just breath and need and that low, breaking sound he made when her hand slid beneath the hem of his sweater, fingers skimming bare skin. He pulled back first barely. Their foreheads touched. His breath mingled with hers, ragged and uneven. "We should stop," he whispered. "Why?" "Because I don't want this to be a transaction." Her heart twisted. "It never was," she said. "Not this." He looked at her then, truly looked, eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. Not cold. Unshielded. "You scare the hell out of me," he said. "Good." He laughed softly, an exhale. Barely shaped. Then kissed her again, slower this time, as if memorizing her mouth, as if each second might be stolen by something cruel and inevitable. And then he stepped back, just far enough to make the space between them hurt. "We should get some sleep," he said. It wasn't rejection. It was restraint. The kind that comes when someone has spent their whole life building walls and, in one night, watches them begin to crack. Roxy nodded, her fingers brushing his arm on the way past. She settled into the bed, still wrapped in his blanket. He lay on the chaise by the fireplace again, same as he had at Thornbridge, but this time he didn't pretend to sleep. Neither of them did, because now there was no curtain to drop, no audience to perform for. Just two people in the dark, quietly falling apart in each other's direction. By morning, the power returned, but nothing else had reset. They were quieter at breakfast. Not awkward, just unsettled. Like two people who had tasted something too honest and didn't know how to pretend it hadn't changed the rules. Roxy stirred her coffee. Adrian skimmed the headlines on his tablet without reading. The quiet between them wasn't empty. It was waiting. "I have a meeting with the foundation board this afternoon," he said finally. "You're coming." "Do I get a script?" she asked, lightly teasing. "No," he said, looking at her over the rim of his cup. "Just be real." She nodded, but her heart fluttered, because real was starting to feel more dangerous than the lie. That afternoon, at the Kingsley Foundation's annual donor roundtable, she sat beside him in a sapphire wrap dress while journalists whispered, investors glanced sideways, and Leon Cray, his rival, his vulture, watched them with a smile, like a scalpel. "You're glowing, miss." "Monroe," Leon said as he shook her hand. "Engagement looks good on you." Must be. Convincing. She didn't blink. Well, when the chemistry's real, you don't have to fake much. Adrian's hand found hers under the table. Not a squeeze. Not a warning. A silent thank you. And suddenly, she didn't care who watched. That night, she returned to her apartment in Queens alone. Her mother's cough echoed softly from the back room. Her sister had left a note and a box of leftover noodles. And for the first time, Roxy looked around her old life and wondered which version of herself was still telling the truth. Chapter 6: Secrets and Scandals. The story broke just after dawn. Roxy awoke to her phone, buzzing in a continuous, mechanical shiver texts, missed calls, news alerts. Her screen glared with chaos. Leaked emails suggest Roxy Monroe's engagement is a PR stunt. Journalist turned Kingsley Darling caught negotiating payout terms in private correspondence. View. Exclusive. She sat upright in bed, blood draining from her face. No. 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 The emails on screen were doctored pieces of genuine scheduling exchanges spliced with fabricated lines about appearance fees, PR bonuses, staged public events, phrases she'd never written, tones she'd never use. But they looked real. And her name was on every one. Her phone buzzed again. Felicity Crown. Don't bother denying. You danced with devils, sweet girl. Now let the flames teach you something. Roxy's breath caught. Felicity did this. She'd taken everything, all of it, and twisted it into a noose. An hour later, Roxy stood in the marble silence of Adrian's office. He hadn't looked at her since she entered. He stood by the window, back rigid, fists clenched, phone pressed to his ear, as his legal team barked through crisis mitigation protocol. Yes, I want the Times rebuttal ready by noon. No, I don't want spin, I want blood. He ended the call and turned. His expression was stone. Worse than anger. It was disappointment. Tell me it's false, he said. Tell me you didn't sell us for a headline. Roxy's voice cracked. I didn't. Adrian, you know me. You know I wouldn't. I don't know you. His voice lashed through her like ice. I know your words. I know your kiss. But I don't know where the performance ends and you begin. I didn't leak anything, she insisted. Felicity. She twisted our communications. She has access to the Mirror's backend, my drafts, even the files I... Don't. He stepped back. Don't give me another name to blame. Her chest ached. You said I make you forget the performance, she whispered. Was that a lie too? He didn't answer. That hurt more than shouting ever could. You think I staged us? She asked, voice breaking. After everything? After the kiss? I think I trusted the wrong person, he said. And now every board seat, every investment, every piece of credibility I rebuilt is burning. Silence roared between them. Roxy stepped forward, desperate, wrecked. Please. Let me fix this. You already fixed it, he said coldly. The story's gone viral. My name is trending with yours again, congratulations. That was the moment she broke. Something behind her eyes shattered, something held together too long by need and hope. I loved you, she said quietly. He flinched. Just once. But then the mask returned. Then you should have known how much this would destroy me. She left the building in a daze. The doorman didn't meet her eyes. The paparazzi didn't shout. They just clicked, 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 catching the tears she refused to let fall. On the subway, she sat like a statue, fists clenched in her lap, her ring burning cold on her finger. He thinks I betrayed him. And worst of all, part of her still wanted to protect him. Even now, back in Queens, her apartment felt like a relic from another life. Her sister was at work. Her mother asleep. The silence made her skin itch. She paced, screamed once, then opened her laptop. If Felicity wanted a war, fine. Roxy had nothing left to lose but the truth. And if she had to torch her career to save Adrian's, so be it. Roxy's fingers flew across the keyboard, her heart a fist of fire in her chest. She dug into old archives, back-channel messages, metadata from Felicity's shared editorial folder, anything she could reach without triggering alarms. She wasn't a hacker. But she'd once dated a digital security consultant who believed in teaching women to defend their digital lives. Right now, she was grateful for every password he'd helped her encrypt. Inside a private backup cache of the Mirror's editorial server, she found it email threads modified, original files time-stamped weeks earlier, and a hidden forward log to an encrypted email address, L.K. Cray Ventures. Com. Leon Cray. That snake had used Felicity as his mouthpiece, fed her doctored text, seeded headlines, weaponized her hunger for power against Adrian's vulnerability and Roxy's career. You weren't supposed to be the story, Felicity had told her once. You were supposed to deliver it. Now she knew why. They'd planned it from the start. Make Roxy the match. Break her into the wound. Tear Adrian open and bleed him dry in public. And I let them, she thought, nausea rising. Because I wanted to believe in the lie I was living. She printed the evidence, bound it, annotated every inconsistency, highlighted dates, metadata, corrupted headers. The proof was solid. The fallout? Unimaginable. By the time she finished, her hands were trembling. Not from fear, from grief. Because what she was about to do would bury her in the industry forever. She walked into the Mirror offices like a woman walking into her own funeral. The bullpen fell silent. Editors looked up. Interns whispered. Her name had become myth and poison. She marched past them to Felicity's glass office. Didn't knock. Just opened the door and dropped the thick binder onto her desk. I know what you did, she said. Felicity looked up, amused. Darling, that's vague. You'll have to narrow it down. Roxy leaned forward, voice low, cutting. You fed doctored documents to Leon Cray. You used my credentials. You burned my trust and his. And yet, here you are, Felicity said with a smirk. Still clinging to the fairy tale. No, Roxy said. I'm setting it on fire. She stepped back, eyes fierce. This is my resignation. I'll make a public statement by morning. You'll be named. Leon, too. Felicity's smirk faltered. You think anyone will believe you? They don't have to. They'll believe the timestamps, the IP logs, and Adrian, he'll believe the silence. You'll never work again. Maybe not, but I'll be able to sleep. She turned and walked out. Didn't look back. She didn't need applause. She just needed the truth to be louder than the lie. That night, Roxy stood on the roof of her apartment building, wind slicing through her sweater. Heart hollow. The truth was out now. She'd sent the evidence to Adrian's legal team. She'd posted her resignation publicly with full disclosure, and she'd given up the only version of safety she'd ever known. But when she looked up at the city, no longer pretending to belong to it, she felt something terrifyingly close to peace. Behind her, a soft sound. She turned, and there he was. Adrian. No entourage. No suit. Just a man in the dark, holding her ring in his hand. I saw the statement, he said. She nodded, swallowed hard. It's all true. He stepped closer. Why did you do it? Because I owed it to you. To me. To the version of us that might have been real. Adrian looked down at the ring. Then up at her. It was real, he said softly. Her breath caught. He came closer. And then, finally, he held her face in both hands and kissed her again. Not out of desperation, not out of performance, but out of truth. And in that kiss, they both surrendered. Not to a story, but to each other. Chapter 7. The Fall. The silence was louder than the scandal. After Roxy's confession and the leaked evidence of Cray's manipulation, the headlines didn't roar, they hissed, slithered, pulled back. The media didn't crucify her. They ignored her. That was worse. Felicity was suspended pending investigation. Leon Cray denied everything but his email domain disappeared overnight. The Mirror's legal team issued a vague statement about editorial violations and unauthorized sourcing. And Roxy Monroe. She was radioactive. Her inbox died. Her bylines vanished. The glossy PR invitations she used to skim through with lazy cynicism stopped coming. Even the pity calls from old journalism school friends ran dry by the third day. By the 5th, she was back to making coffee in a tiny indie bookstore in Long Island City, wearing a borrowed apron with the name Penny stitched across the front. "Don't you used to be a customer started once?" "No," she replied. Across the river, Adrian Kingsley was rebuilding in silence too. But his fall looked different. His board had rallied after the scandal imploded. With Leon discredited and the fake engagement cleared of deception, Adrian's stock stabilized. His foundation quietly launched a new urban housing initiative, redirecting media attention from the personal to the philanthropic. Still, he hadn't spoken to Roxy since the night on the rooftop. Not publicly, not privately. She told herself that was fair. He'd trusted her once and been burned. Maybe forgiveness was a luxury even billionaires couldn't afford. And yet, every morning she woke with the memory of his kiss. Every night she went to bed with the silence where his voice used to be. The bookstore was quiet that afternoon. Roxy sat behind the counter reading an old Joan Didion collection when a familiar voice made her heart stop. "Do you have anything on grief?" She looked up slowly. Adrian stood in front of the register. No guards. No tailored armor. Just jeans, a gray sweater, and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in days. She stared at him, stunned. "There's a whole section," she managed. "Nonfiction. Back left." "I'm not looking for advice," he said. "Just something honest." She swallowed. "Joan's good for that." He nodded, but didn't move. "This is where you went?" he asked. She folded her arms. "Everyone needs a fall. This doesn't look like a fall. You didn't see the tips I made last Friday." A pause. "I saw your statement," he said. "Read every word." "I know. I didn't thank you." "You don't need to." Another silence. Heavy. Sharp-edged. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The spotlight?" "No," she said honestly. "But I miss the fire." "You still have it." She looked at him, really looked. There was something in his eyes now she hadn't seen before. Not just remorse. Longing. "Why are you here, Adrian?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded page. A printout. Her resignation letter. The one she'd posted the night it all burned. "You said truth matters more than applause," he said. "You gave up everything to protect mine. And I let you walk away. I didn't ask you to chase me." "No," he said, voice thick. "But I couldn't breathe without trying." He stepped forward. "I didn't know how to love someone without control. But with you, I didn't want control. I wanted chaos. I wanted you." Her eyes stung, but she didn't move. "You left," she whispered. "I was afraid if I stayed, I'd become the version of myself you wrote about in the beginning. The cold one. The brand. And now?" He reached for her hand, held it like it still belonged to him. "Now I want to rewrite the ending. With you." The bookstore's silence wrapped around them like a held breath. Adrian still held her hand lightly, reverently, not like a man claiming something, but like someone asking permission to try again. Roxy's voice was barely above a whisper. "You can't just walk in here with words and fix what broke." "I know," he said, "but I'm not here to fix anything." "Then what?" He looked at her, eyes clearer than she'd ever seen them. "I'm here to fail better." That stopped her. Adrian Kingsley, the man who'd built an empire on perfection, who never said sorry without controlling the narrative, was choosing failure. Choosing uncertainty. Choosing her. He reached into his coat again and pulled something small from his pocket. Not a ring. Not a contract. A worn envelope, her name scribbled on the front in his handwriting. She opened it slowly. Inside, a charcoal sketch. Her. Not polished. Not posed. Not idealized. Just real. Tousled hair. Circles under her eyes. A half smile that didn't quite reach her lips but said everything anyway. Beneath it, in faint pencil, "This is the version I missed." Roxy felt something break inside her. Not pain. Relief. Because it wasn't about the headlines anymore. Or the money. Or the spectacle. It was about being seen and still being wanted. "I don't trust easily," she said. "Neither do I. I get scared when people get too close. Then let me stay far enough to catch you." Tears slipped free before she could stop them. You're not good at this." He smiled gently. "I'm not trying to be. I just want to be better with you." She shook her head, laughing through the tears. "God, this is such a bad idea. Terrible. I'll probably run again. I'll follow slower next time. And I'll doubt you. I'll earn you." That was when she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't staged. It was soft, certain, fragile in the way only truth can be. And when she pulled back, breath trembling, she whispered, "I want to fall. But this time with someone who catches me." His hand pressed to her cheek. His voice raw. "I will." That night, the world didn't shift. No headline screamed. No cameras flashed. No press releases were written. But somewhere between two tired hearts and one quiet rooftop sketch, something extraordinary began. Not a performance. Not a promise. A choice. And that made all the difference. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The studio lights were brutal. Roxy sat beneath them in a slate-gray blazer that made her eyes look harder than she felt. Across from her, the host of Spotlight now shuffled her notes, voice calm, eyes gleaming with barely restrained excitement. "You were the scandal," the host said. "Now you're the story. Why come forward now?" Roxy's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair. "Because it was never about the story," she said. "It was about the truth. And the truth is I was part of a lie. But not his lie." The screen behind them lit up with blurred screenshots of emails. Edited headlines. Red-circled phrases and timelines. "So you're claiming Leon Cray and Felicity Crown conspired to manipulate public perception?" the host asked. "No," Roxy said calmly. "I'm proving it." She handed over a printed packet of evidence. Hard copies. Timestamps. IP addresses. Server logs that traced every leaked document straight to Felicity's private access keys and Leon's dummy corporate shell. The host leafed through them with practiced grace, but even she faltered on page 3. This is substantial. It's the reason my name was dragged through tabloids. The reason Adrian Kingsley was nearly ousted from his own board. The reason I walked away from everything I built. And I'd do it again." The host leaned forward. "Even after all that, you'd choose to defend him?" Roxy didn't blink. "Yes. Because the real story is that I fell in love with a man the world refused to see clearly, and I refused to let a lie be the last word." The studio fell silent. Behind the glass, her new manager, nodded once. Across millions of screens, Roxy Monroe stopped being the girl who faked her way into a billionaire's life. She became the woman who burned the fantasy down and stood in the ashes with her head held high. Later that night, Adrian watched the interview from his office. Alone. The city glittered beyond the glass like a reflection he no longer trusted. But Roxy's voice, low, certain, defiant, cut through everything. She hadn't just defended him. She'd chosen him, not for gain, not for fame, but because she believed in him. His phone buzzed. A message from his comms director. "Are we responding?" Adrian stared at the screen, then picked up the ring box still sitting on his desk. Not a prop. Not a deal term. Not fake. "No," he said aloud, voice firm. "We're not responding. We're reclaiming." The ballroom at the Metropolitan Arts Foundation buzzed with velvet-clad donors and curated media. Spotlights skimmed over crystal chandeliers and silent auction displays. The evening was meant to be a return to form for Kingsley Global Adrian's public reclamation, but he hadn't planned to speak. Until now, Roxy stood near the back, half hidden beside a ficus and a woman in couture worth more than her student loans. She hadn't come to be seen. She'd come to watch Adrian step back into power. What she didn't expect was to hear her name over the microphone. "Before we proceed with tonight's presentation," Adrian said from the stage, voice calm but resolute, "there's something I need to clarify." The room hushed. Roxy froze. "A few months ago, I made a business decision," he continued. Hands folded. Eyes sweeping the crowd. "I invited a journalist, Roxy Monroe, into my life as part of a calculated response to public scrutiny. The plan was clear. The relationship was not..." A few chuckles. Some murmurs. He looked directly at her. I underestimated her. Her fire, her decency, her ability to make me forget I was performing. And when the story twisted against her, I didn't defend her. I stayed silent. I thought I was protecting what I'd built, but I was really just protecting my pride. Roxy felt her throat tighten. A journalist raised a phone. Someone gasped softly, but Adrian kept speaking, voice growing steadier with each word. This woman whom I once accused of betrayal risked everything to protect my name. She lost her job, her reputation, her safety net, and she still chose the truth. She chose me when I no longer deserved it. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a velvet box, and stepped down off the stage. The crowd parted like silk. Roxy stood rooted to the floor as Adrian crossed the room, each step echoing louder than applause. When he reached her, he opened the box. Inside, the ring, the same one he'd given her at the beginning, the one that had once symbolized a lie. Now, it gleamed with something terrifyingly pure. "Roxanne Monroe," he said, his voice lower now just for her. "I don't need a contract. I don't want a performance. I want a partner, one who keeps me honest, one who makes me laugh when the world expects silence, one who burns down my walls and walks barefoot through the ashes." She laughed, tears on her lashes. "Barefoot? You are a sadist. Only for you." Then he knelt, not for spectacle, for sincerity. "Will you marry me for real this time?" Roxy stared down at him, at the room full of strangers, at the cameras, the noise, and none of it mattered. She nodded, breathless. "Yes, for real." He slipped the ring on her finger. This time, it fit perfectly, and when he rose to kiss her, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't broadcast. It was simply theirs. The next day's headlines screamed, "Real love. Real ring. Roxy Monroe gets her happily ever after, no script needed." But the real story was something quieter, something that lived between heartbeats and held hands, something they chose to write together. Chapter 9. The Real Proposal. 2 weeks after the ballroom, 2 weeks since Roxy said yes. And still, she hadn't picked a dress, called a planner, or told her mother, because for once, the decision wasn't about the wedding. It was about the marriage, and that was something she and Adrian had to define without an audience. She sat on the balcony of his Tribeca townhouse, legs tucked under her, watching the city glow against a lavender dusk. Adrian appeared behind her, barefoot, carrying 2 mugs of something dark and complicated. "Chamomile," he said, "but with a drop of bourbon. Therapy in a cup," she murmured. "Exactly." He sat beside her. The silence between them had become comfortable lately, less charged, more earned. "I was thinking," he said. "Always dangerous." He smirked. "We could do the wedding now. Press event. Clean and fast. Walk out of it with the headlines we want, the deal sealed, and no one asking questions." She sipped her drink. "And what if I don't want clean and fast?" "Then you get messy and real," he said. "And I'll follow." She looked over at him. His face in the fading light was softer, less armor, more man. This wasn't the Adrian who negotiated mergers in boardrooms. This was the one who kissed her shoulder before she woke up, who drew her face at midnight because sleep never came easy, who didn't just want her in his life, he needed her in it, even when it was inconvenient. "Do you know what scares me?" she said. "Besides your mother's questions about grandchildren, besides that," she set the mug down, "that this might be the only thing in my life I didn't earn through fight. That somehow I just have you. And I don't know what to do with something I didn't bleed for." Adrian turned fully to face her, took her hand. "You did bleed for it," he said. "You lost your name, your work, your belief in everything that used to protect you. You gave up your version of safe. That's more than a fight, Roxy. That's war." She didn't cry, but something cracked open quietly inside her, and she whispered, "Then marry me somewhere the world can't find us." He blinked. "You're serious? Deadly? You want to elope?" "No. I want to commit. Without performance. Without cameras. Just us." And maybe Lily. And your housekeeper? If she promises not to cry too loudly. Adrian laughed, a full, unguarded laugh that felt like sunlight cutting through fog. Then say when? Tomorrow. Here? She thought for a moment, then nodded. Here. This rooftop. At sunset. You, me, no scripts. He grinned. You're unbelievable. You're in love with me. That, too. And just like that, it was decided. No stylists, no scandal, just two people ready to say yes again. And this time, for all the right reasons, the sun dipped lower, casting Manhattan in amber and violet, as though the city itself had paused to watch. The rooftop of Adrian's townhouse was dressed in nothing but candlelight and hope. No floral arches. No string quartets. No headlines. Just Roxy Monroe in a simple ivory slip dress, barefoot, a hand-pressed bouquet of garden roses from the courtyard below, resting in her palm, and Adrian, in his shirt sleeves, no tie, heart wide open. Lily stood to the side in a navy jumpsuit, holding a tiny notepad and trying very hard not to cry. Adrian's housekeeper, Margot, dabbed her eyes unapologetically and took pictures no one had asked her to take. There was no officiant, no choreography, only promises. Adrian took her hands. His voice was low, steady, but full. I used to think control was power, that I could shape the world if I just stayed untouched by it. Then you walked in, furious and brilliant, and ruined me. He smiled. You ruined everything I thought I wanted, and gave me something better. Roxy exhaled shakily, her thumb brushing over his wrist. You were the story I never meant to write, she whispered. I came into your life trying to survive mine. But somewhere between the staged smiles and the fake headlines, I stopped pretending. Her voice broke just a little, because loving you became the most honest thing I've ever done. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. The city buzzed around them, horns, sirens, wind against glass. But all they heard was breath, truth, a choice. No rings this time? She asked softly. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out the same velvet box. Same ring. New story. He slipped it onto her finger again. And this time, it stayed. Lily cleared her throat dramatically. By the very unofficial powers vested in me by the state of chaos and true love, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Margaret sobbed. And Adrian kissed Roxy like the world didn't need to know. Because this time, the story belonged to them. That night, they lay tangled in linen sheets beneath open windows, the sound of the city drifting in like a lullaby. Roxy ran her fingers over Adrian's chest, her cheek resting against his shoulder. Do you think people will believe it? That we got married on a rooftop without telling anyone? That a lie turned into something this real? He kissed her temple. Does it matter? Not anymore. She smiled, closed her eyes. And in that silence, after months of noise, they finally exhaled. Chapter 10. A Better Kind of Story. 6 months later, Roxy Monroe sat behind a scarred oak desk in a sunlit loft in Brooklyn, wearing yoga pants and a cardigan that belonged to Adrian. The room smelled like strong coffee and ink. The walls were bare except for a few frames. One was a sketch, her sketch charcoal and honest. The other was a magazine clipping from years ago, her first front-page byline. She kept it not for pride, but perspective. She tapped her pencil against a notebook, then leaned into the mic. This is unscripted, and I'm Roxy Monroe. Today's episode: Why Some Stories Deserve to Fall Apart Before They Can Be Told Right. Her voice was calmer now, confident, not polished, but real. Her podcast had found its rhythm. No celebrity gossip, no performance. Just narratives that lived in the gray areas, stories about reputation, redemption, and rebuilding. Stories like hers. Across the loft, Adrian stood barefoot in their kitchen, sleeves rolled, stirring something on the stove that smelled suspiciously like garlic and too much ambition. He glanced over. Tell them I still think our origin story could have used fewer lawsuits. Roxy grinned behind the mic. And Adrian still thinks every good romance should start with legal threats. For the record, I disagree. She clicked off the recording. You're lucky I edited out the part where you said, I like you better out of contract. Oof. He smirked. Because I meant it. You still owe me a honeymoon. I was thinking we build one. She blinked. A honeymoon? A place, he clarified. A real one. Not a hotel. Not borrowed. Something that's ours. Beach. Books. No cell service. Maybe a dog. Roxy set her notepad down. You want to build a house with me? Correction, he said. I want to build a life with you. The house is just where we'll keep it. She crossed to him, wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. You're getting sappy. Blame the pasta. It smells terrible. I said it smelled like ambition, not that it was good. They both laughed, and the sound filled the space like music. Later, they sat on the fire escape, passing a bottle of wine between them, city lights flickering below. Do you regret it? She asked. Any of it? Adrian took a slow sip. Only that I didn't kiss you sooner. Before the contract, before the cameras, she leaned her head on his shoulder. You were awful in the beginning. You were worse. Fair. But, he said, you made me better. She turned to him. You made me braver. And in that quiet, no headlines, no threats, no pressure, two people who began as opposites sat side by side, bound not by the chaos they'd survived, but by the truth they'd chosen. The morning her final column went live, Roxy didn't check the views. She didn't open social media, didn't text her agent, didn't refresh a headline tracker like she used to in the Mirror days, heart pounding, wondering how far her name would travel. She just sipped her coffee in bed beside a man who never needed her to perform, and watched the sunlight crawl across the sheets. Adrian read the piece aloud from his tablet, voice steady. I started out in this industry thinking the truth could be edited. Polished. Controlled. But I learned something else in the end. The truest stories are the ones you can't script. The ones that surprise you. The ones that undo you before they make you whole. He paused, looked at her. Still wish you'd written about my better jawline. She rolled her eyes, smiling. That's in the director's cut. He leaned in, brushed a kiss against her shoulder. You wrote a better ending than I ever deserved. You earned it. We both did. She rested her forehead against his. So what now? Now, he said, we stop performing. We live. We mess up. We forgive. We build that beach house. We adopt that dog. We learn how to burn pasta together instead of bridges. She laughed. And maybe, one day. He looked at her gently. A baby? A story, she said. Maybe both. Weeks later, the column was picked up by The New Yorker under the headline, Love Without Strategy. A Reclamation. By Roxy Monroe. It wasn't about scandals. Or spin. It was about love. And the man who taught her that losing everything might be the only way to find what's real. Adrian launched a new division of his foundation that month, one dedicated to media literacy, creative independence, and ethical storytelling. At the press launch, when asked why, he said, because someone I love reminded me that the best kind of empire isn't the one you build alone. It's the one you share. One messy, beautiful truth at a time. Later that night, in the quiet glow of their Brooklyn loft, Roxy curled into his arms. Do you ever miss the show? She murmured. No, he said. Not when I have the story,